Hi guys, this is Miss Michael, and I'm going to begin my video on genetic drift, bottlenecking, and the founder effect with a clip from an artist. And this artist she has made a study of the color blindness on the island of the Pinglapes. And it's an interesting project, and I know this is biology, but she has honed in on the um, allele frequency of this color blindness gene that has increased, and she has used it to create art projects. So we'll start in the Pinglapes Islands.
This photograph is the key image of the series The Island of the Colorblind. A lot of my work, of my personal projects, is centered around a certain genetic trail that runs through people's lives and that shapes and forms their community or their personal life or their physical identity. The Island of the Colorblind is a series about achromatopsia, or complete colorblindness. There's an island in the Pacific, Micronesia, where there's an extremely high percentage of this very extraordinary kind of color blindness that doesn't allow people to see color. I started photography developing in the dark room, in black and white on film and making my own prints. Since then, I never touched black and white until this project came up. So after I returned from the island, I invited achromatopic people from the Netherlands and Belgium to bring color back into my black and white images, to literally paint onto the image. People felt free and at the same time struggled with not being able to have control over color as well, because I wouldn't tell them which colors they were using, and it makes people feel insecure and uncomfortable. During the painting sessions I organized, I met Anne Floor. She's from the Netherlands and she has achromatopic vision, and she's super talented. She made beautiful paintings and really added on another layer to the work by really allowing me to see through her eyes. To Pingelab, I brought my D700 that I had converted to infrared and the D810 that I used as a normal camera. I wanted to experiment with infrared because I wanted to find a way for myself to redefine and rediscover color while shooting the project. With this converted camera that reads light differently, I was also triggered to rethink the color perspective. And the result of that are images that are so surreal in their colors that it makes people open up to this whole new reality and this freedom of color that you get if you let go of the conventional way of looking at it. The work The Island of the Colorblind is about trying to open people's eyes to not seeing the absence of something as something you lack or as a weakness, but as strength, as something that is a richness, as something that adds on to your own reality that you create and that you have the power to create and that you create in your own way. And it's about connecting vision at the same time acknowledging that we all see the world different.
And so the majority of the population on Pinglap Island, they see color very differently because of this genetic trail that she was mentioning. We have an article from National Geographic that covers the this concept, but here's some of her photographs, and it really does capture that viewpoint of the Pinglapes and how they actually view images and see color. The majority of the island is colorblind, and this is because of a few evolutionary mechanisms that are coming into play. Um, and we're going to talk about those. So, um, one of those main um, concepts is bottlenecking. So, In the 1700s, Pinglap Island experienced a typhoon. And the typhoon, because the island was isolated, the typhoon had left only a handful of survivors. And in that handful of survivors, there was one survivor who had the colorblind traits. And over many populations, as a result, this has caused most or many of the population on this island to be colorblind. Bottlenecking is an evolutionary concept that occurred. So, what is bottlenecking? Bottlenecking is when an event causes a drastic decrease in the population, almost to the point of extinction. And if you look at the picture here, it's represented in the bottleneck. You have your original population, and then a bottlenecking event occurs. In the case of Pinglap Island, it was a typhoon in the 1700s. Here are some other things that can cause a bottleneck effect on a population: a volcanic eruption, an earthquake, overpredation or overhunting, or radioactive poisoning. These events can severely reduce a population to almost extinction, and that phenomenon is called bottlenecking. It's a type of genetic drift, and a population bottleneck leads to a decrease in the genetic diversity of a population. So it means that the population is less able to handle pressures. In the case of Pinglap Island, um, let's go over a few mechanisms of evolution vocabulary before we look at that example again. So, genetic drift is just a random change of allele frequency in a gene pool. Um, because of that bottlenecking event that occurred, it changed the frequency of the color blindness alleles over time, and it increased it. Genetic drift occurs when there is a small population, or it occurs after a bottlenecking event. And when I talk about allele frequency, it is just I'm simply referring to how often a certain allele is expressed by a population. Again, allele frequency is going to remain stable when you have a large population. Genetic drift will occur when the population is small or after a bottlenecking event. Um, this when individuals carry alleles that don't really represent the alleles of the original population, like Pinglap Island, you have what's called the founder effect. So, in the instance of the Pinglap Island, the survivor that had the color blindness, he essentially is the founder. And because that small population replicated over time without gene flow, several generations later, you have what is called the founder effect, where an allele that was, or that is typically uncommon in other populations, has become common. Has become common. Again, these are four terms that you will need to know: genetic drift, allele frequency, founder effect, and the bottleneck effect. Again, the bottleneck effect is when a size of a population is dramatically reduced due to a natural disaster or some other random chance event. Okay, so looking at the Pinglap Atoll. So, bottlenecking. How did this happen? It was a devastating typhoon in 1775 that caused a population bottleneck. Again, that is when the population was reduced to just a handful of survivors. Genetic drift. One of the survivors, the ruler, carried a rare gene for an extreme type of color blindness. Eventually, he passed the gene on to the island's later generations, and that is a type that is genetic drift. You've had a change in allele frequencies, in that allele frequency over time. The founder effect, again, another type of genetic drift. So today, roughly 10% of the island's people are still believed to have this gene for the condition. Um, complete achromatopsia, which is it's a significantly higher rate than anywhere else in the world.